Hello, this is Science Professor Benny, and today we are going to discuss the effect of muscle fatigue on the rate of squeezing clothespin. And when we talk about muscle fatigue, we are talking about how tiredness in your muscles. Okay, so today's investigation is about looking at muscle fatigue. If your muscles become tired, will you be able to squeeze the clothespin many times or less time? In our previous lesson, we discussed dependent and independent variable between the child and the parent. Who is a dependent variable? Who is an independent variable? And we look at questions like, what do you depend on your parent for? What do your parent provide you that makes you happy? All right? And we said that you, the child, depends on your parent. Therefore, you are the dependent. All right? So if the child is a dependent, then the parent is the independent. So in this image, we see that the child is a dependent, the parent is independent. All right? So if you depend on your mother, then you are the dependent. And your mother is the independent. All right, so today our focus is about using this investigation. And it says a student conducted an experiment to test the effect of the amount of exercise on the number of times to squeeze in a clothespin. So that means that this is a clothespin. If you exercise on your hands, your fingers, all right, a long time, will you be able to squeeze the clothespin many times, or you'll be able to squeeze it less time? Remember that the more exercise you do on your fingers or your hand, that means your muscles will become fatigued. And we are using this investigation to also identify or determine dependent variable and independent variable. So in this investigation, the discussion question is, what is the dependent variable and what is the independent variable? Let's continue. Making connections to real-world phenomena. And as you can see in this image, this is Science Professor Benny doing rock climbing. All right? So this is Professor Benny reaching the top of the rock and kind of jubilating. Yay, I did it, so fast. All right, so the question is, if Professor Benny exercised many times, will he be able to climb faster and also many times than before exercise and doing any physical activity? And we should remember that the more you do physical activity, the more you exercise, the more you do this rock climbing, the more you become tired, the more your muscles will become fatigued. Okay, so that is a connection. So I'm not going to tell you the response that if you do more, you'll not be able to do it less, or you'll be able to do it more. We are going to do the investigation to find out. So do you think Professor Bennett will be able to complete the rock climbing many times or faster after exercise or before exercise? All right, so this is something I want you to discuss with your partners. All right, so this is a clothespin. If you do physical activity on your fingers or your hand, we'll be able to do the clothespin many times or less time. That is the connection we are using with the rock climbing. All right, remember, rock climbing, it requires a lot of energy. Okay, it makes your muscles tired or fatigued. All right, so going back to this investigation, explain why exercising your fingers will cause you to squeeze a clothespin more times or less time. If you exercise on your fingers, how would that affect how many times you'll be able to, squeeze the clothespin? And here we need to be able to find the dependent variable and independent variable. And when we talk about dependent variable is what we measure or observe. Independent variable is what we change or manipulate. All right? So in this investigation, what we are measuring is one of these, okay? The effect of exercise on the number of times to squeeze in a clothespin. So are we changing exercise or we are measuring exercise? And also, are we recording or measuring the number of times to squeeze a clothespin, or we are changing that? Okay? So if you look at this, we are measuring the number of times to squeeze in a clothespin. And what we are changing is exercise. So you can either do exercise or you can do no exercise at all. Then you see the effect of the number of times you can squeeze the clothespin. All right. So there is something that I also have that I've developed. I'm going to show it to else, especially to finding dependent and independent variable an easy way. So this is a formula I have developed. This is a formula developed by Professor Obene. And this, sometimes on the questions, the state exam question, they will ask you to identify dependent and independent variable. They can say it in an active voice or a passive voice. All right, so let's look at the same investigation. It says a student conducted an experiment to test the effect of the amount of exercise on the number of times to squeezing a clothespin. And if you look at it, this is in active voice. Let's look at a passive voice. It says a student conducted an experiment to test whether the number of times to squeezing a clothespin is affected by the amount of exercise. All right. So to find a dependent variable, if you know that dependent variable is what we measure or record or observe, then you already know that the number of times to squeezing a clothespin is the dependent variable. And if this is the dependent variable, the independent variable is exercise, the amount of exercise. Here they wrote it in reverse, and that's why it's a passive voice. All right, so this is the formula. So whenever they write it, the effect of blank on blank is in active voice. And what comes first is the independent variable. So independent variable on dependent variable in this case. And whenever they write it in passive voice, this is what you do. Is the dependent variable that comes first. Whether blank is affected by blank. And the second blank is the independent variable. So this is for students who need more support. This is like a formula to guide you to identify dependent and independent variable. With dependent and independent variable, as long as you know the description of the experiment, you will be able to find this easily. And this also connects with, in math class, the dependent variable, the x and the y axis. All right, which one goes on the x-axis and which one goes on the y-axis? The dependent variable or the independent variable? All right, so this is a formula to help students identify dependent and independent variable easily. All right, so let's continue. Let's continue to make another connection, and this is about the Living in Space article that we read. So this is an experiment to test the effect of living in space on height. All right, so the dependent variable, is it living in space or is height? And we should remember that dependent variable is what we measure or record. All right, and the independent variable is what we change or manipulate. So in this case, we see that Mark Kelly stayed on Earth based on the article, based on that investigation. Mark Kelly stayed on Earth, and his twin brother, identical twin brother, Scott Kelly, went to live in space for almost a year. So living in space is the independent variable because that's what we change. That's what we manipulate. All right? And so he is a control group because he didn't receive the variable that you are testing. And he is the experimental group because he received the variable that we are testing. All right, so the dependent variable in this situation is what we are measuring, and we are measuring the height. And the independent variable is what we are changing, whether you live in space or you stay on Earth, or how long you even live in space. That is the independent variable, and that's what we are changing. All right, so for independent work time activity, you are going to pick two scenarios. And that connects with the exercise about squeezing clothespin. All right, so you are going to pick one that you agree with. So you can say, I agree with scenario one. Scenario one says, exercising your fingers will warm up your muscles and cause you to squeeze a clothespin more times. That means if you exercise your fingers You'll be able to squeeze the clothespin many times. Then you need to provide your explanation. This is because then you provide your reasoning. Scenario number 2 says, I agree with exercising your fingers will make your muscles fatigued or tired. There is a typo here. All right, tired. Okay, and cause you to squeeze a clothespin less time. This is because then you provide your explanation. All right, so this is dependent and independent variable, and today we use the effect of muscle fatigue on the rate of squeezing clothespin. All right, so thank you very much for watching. This is Science Professor Obene.